On the 12th of July, at about 9:26, the Albuquerque Police Department started receiving 911 calls in reference to a shooting that was taking place at 1600 Eubank Southeast, Building 2 at the Emcore Corporation. Within a matter of minutes, the Albuquerque Police Department received approximately 30 911 calls from employees within the business at Building 2, employees from Building 1, and people who were in the area who were in the process of self-evacuating. At 9:29, the first officers arrived on the scene. They immediately put together an active shooter response team, and within minutes we had 9 officers who had entered Building 2. As part of an active shooter response, their job is to go in and to go after the location of where the shooter is and to secure and or neutralize that shooter. As those 9 officers entered, within minutes a second group of officers arrived, and within minutes after that we had a second active shooter team entering the building as well. Through the process of the investigation, we've been able to determine the sequence of events that we believe that occurred. At about 9:15, sometime after 9:15, Robert Reza confronted Miss Sharon Cunningham, age 47, who's an employee of Emcore. The first confrontation between Mr. Reza and Miss Cunningham occurred right there at the top of the stairs. It appeared that Mr. Reza was approaching the business into the courtyard area, which is just below those stairs, closer to the building. As he confronted Miss Cunningham, who was on her way up the stairs, he immediately began firing at Miss Cunningham. Without provocation, without warning, for no reason at all, he discharged his handgun at her, striking her 2 times. He then noticed sitting on a table just below the stairs, Adrienne Basciano, who is his girlfriend. Ms. Basciano was sitting at the table with what we believe is Michele Turner. He then at that time began firing rounds at Ms. Basciano and struck her multiple times at the table. Michele Turner then attempted to escape Mr. Reza, and she began running westbound along the front of the building. Ms. Turner was hit with gunfire from Mr. Reza. Mr. Reza then approached Ms. Turner and fired additional rounds again at her when she was in a helpless position laying down on the ground outside of the building. He then retreated just a little bit farther to the east, at which time he discharged his firearm, shooting out the window in the business. He then climbed in through that window. It's a window that's about 3 feet off the ground. He then climbed into that window, into the office, went through the office, and entered into the hallway of the business. Upon entering the hallway of the business, of course, employees were trying their best to get out of his way. He then began firing at employees in the business as they were trying to retreat. He then worked his way inside the business back to the west and went to a hallway that went back towards the foyer, which is located at the northwest corner of the business. In that area, he began discharging his firearm multiple times again at employees who were trying to take cover in the foyer area, hiding behind desks. In the foyer area, and while fleeing, he first, we believe, encountered Mr. Rodney Noble. Mr. Rodney Noble was shot 1 time in the back. He was able to self-evacuate and get himself out of the building. In the foyer, he did confront Miss Dixie Colvin. She was shot in both legs, at which time, by being shot in both legs, she could not get out. And this is one of those situations where other employees came to her aid, began rendering first aid because of her gunshot wounds, and assisted in getting her out of the building. Also, somewhere in the area of the foyer of that hallway, Miss Melissa Mia was also shot in the leg and received her injuries. At that time, it appears that Mr. Reza then left the foyer area, went back into the interior of the building. It appears that as he was going through the interior of the building, he was actually looking for something or someone. At some point in time, he actually entered into the cafeteria in the building, which was occupied by employees. He looked around, but then exited the area, and then went back into the office area in which he had actually shot the window out to enter into the building. At that point in time, we don't know if he saw those first responders and was unable to make an escape, but for some reason, while in that office building, or in that office, He took the handgun that he had and shot himself one time in the head. That's where he was located deceased. Present with Mr. Reza, who's age 37, we did locate a Springfield 45 caliber handgun. It was still loaded with at least one round, and we did find additional ammunition on his possession. It appears that just prior to going inside of the building, after shooting the first 3 victims outside, he did reload his firearm outside. We did find a magazine out there that shows that he did have intent to commit these crimes through the fact that he did reload his ammunition. We did recover the vehicle that Mr. Reza arrived at the location in. That vehicle has been sealed and towed and is now in custody of the Albuquerque Police Department. And later this afternoon we should be doing a search warrant on that vehicle. We also did recover a backpack that Mr. Reza had deposited there at the scene. In that backpack was also a holster that we believe belonged to the 45 caliber handgun that was recovered. Our sympathies goes out to the victims in this particular crime. Again, Ms. Cunningham and Ms. Turner were shot without provocation. They were shot without warning, just out doing their jobs. It appears that Ms. Cunningham was actually moving, taking supplies and equipment from one building to the other when she had that chance encounter with Mr. Reza and was shot. When those officers arrived as part of the secondary team, they did come across Ms. Cunningham, realized that she was very seriously wounded. That's where the officers actually removed her from that area of the stairway, carried her to a police car, put her in the back of the police car, and actually drove her out to where paramedics were waiting on Eubank. And we saw that same thing happen with several of the other victims. As those original officers responded to the scene, obviously a very chaotic scene. One of the things that officers encountered were employees who were sheltered in place. There were employees that were found that had locked themselves within rooms within the interior of the building, employees hiding under desks. Immediately when the first shooting began, through a series of interviews, there were employees that were outside the building trying to get in, and employees inside the building trying to get out. So obviously a very chaotic state for everybody. We continue to hear stories of employees helping fellow employees get them to areas of safety. As the officers began doing their room clearing, they did encounter employees. They were asked to remain sheltered in place, and everybody followed the directions of the officers. That's very, very important in a situation like this, because as the officers continue to search the building, the last thing we want to do is have a chance encounter with someone who is trying to self-evacuate themselves. Again, obviously this particular business had a lot of training, and their employees knew exactly what to do and listened to that of law enforcement. A lot of questions yesterday about how Mr. Reza entered the building. Again, he entered the building by shooting out the window in an office and climbing inside. And we believe that his attempt was to try to use that same window to exit the building. However, that never occurred. Mr. Reza was deceased, and he has been transported to the office of the examiner.